Hello, and welcome back to the Bring Your Own Brigade post-screening conversation. My name is Dilcia Barrera. I am a programmer for the festival, and I'm joining you from unceded Tonga and Chumash land, known as Los Angeles. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that the chat feature on the platform is now active, and on the right side of the screen below the video, you will find the area where you can submit questions for the film team that is here with us today. I encourage you all to send us your questions. And I'd like to thank everyone for fostering conversation that is welcoming to all and abides by our community agreement. And today is definitely a special moment because we're joined by Lucy Walker, Director of Bring Your Own Brigade. Hi, Lucy.
Hello.
Where are you joining us from? And can you please help introduce all the guests that are here with you today?
Yes, I am also joining you from the unceded territory, the unceded Tongvan and Chumash territory, known as Los Angeles. And I'm really thrilled that we have a wonderful set of guests who you might recognize from the film, even though some of them have had haircuts. So please welcome our wonderful special guests, and I'm going to encourage them to introduce themselves in alphabetical order by first name. So please let's go ahead and do that, starting with Don, I believe.
Hi, good afternoon. Don Hankins, and I'm in Concal territory, and I'm a Miwok person working at California State University, Chico, in the geography department as a pyrogeographer.
And everyone else introduce themselves.
Yeah.
Julian, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Julian. I'm one of the producers of the movie, and I too am standing on unceded Tongvan land. Hello.
And Trina? You're still muted.
You're muted.
Sasakati. My name is Trina Cunningham. I live in my ancestral homeland, which is the Mountain Maidu, just north of Paradise.
Beautiful. And then let's invite Steve and Zeke and Maeve to appear like magic.
Hi, I'm Steve Pine. I'm an emeritus professor at Arizona State University, a fire historian, pyromantic, and I'm speaking to you from the ancestral lands of the White Mountain Apache.
And Maeve?
Hi, good evening. I'm Maeve Juarez, a firefighter with the Montecito Fire Department, and I'm joining you from the unceded territory of Chumash here in Montecito, California.
Hello, my name is Zeke Lunder. I'm a pyrogeographer, meaning that I study wildfire on the landscape. I live and work in Chico, California, in Northern California, near the town of Paradise. And this land has always been occupied and is still, luckily for us, being managed in ways by the Mechoopda people.
Wonderful. So I'm going to start off the conversation, and then we will take a moment to address some of the questions, as the chat is already very active and have so many questions for the team. Lucy, you've been at Sundance so many times. One of the reasons we love your cinema and the reason we continue to invite you back is you are consistently daring to tackle new subjects and push yourself as a filmmaker. In the film, you mentioned why the theme interested you, but how did you start this journey, and what was the first course of action that led you to start shooting?
I was really moved by the Thomas Fire, and one of our producers, Holly, who's a dear friend, has a family who are both resident and firefighter in that area, and I was very concerned with them, for them every day. And I had friends affected by the fire, and it was so dramatic. And I was really worrying about them and trying to understand this terrible situation. And day by day, the fire would move around and they'd evacuate or they'd go home. And the firefighters, the battles kept coming. And it was a huge fire at the time, the biggest in California history. And I kept thinking, I need to understand this. Where's the documentary film? And I think documentaries are such a good way of getting a handle on a complicated subject, the best way, I think. And my colleagues have made these documentaries that have actually allowed me to understand really complicated situations like Syrian conflict, or, just I can, sexual assault in the military. I can just name these incredible documentaries where I've just understood a whole subject by a really wonderfully made documentary. And there kind of wasn't one at that time. And I kept thinking, like, who's going to make that? And it was this terrible day at the end of the Thomas fire, and I kept texting every single day my producer friend Holly and saying, "Is your family okay?" I also knew that one of her family members was invalid and couldn't evacuate. And every day she said, "Yeah, Montecito's okay. Montecito's okay." And then we woke up January 9th, 2019, and 2018, and 22 people have been killed overnight by a debris flow following the Thomas fire. And it was just horrifying. And fortunately, her family was okay, but I couldn't believe it. And I thought, somebody has to do this. And so we just jumped in with both feet, and we found Maeve, who's based out of Montecito. And I thought, I don't know anything, but help me. And Maeve was really kind enough to bring me in. At that time, I knew nothing about fire, but we were allowed to hop in her truck thanks to her incredible generosity. And I feel like, and Maeve can perhaps speak to this, but the firefighters were really generous. And I felt, and everyone has been so generous in explaining the situation. Because I do feel like there's a feeling that we got to explain this better, because a lot of the public don't understand it, myself included. So everyone was really welcoming and trying to explain it. But we didn't get very far when that summer there was an even bigger fire. And I thought, gosh, I can't make a film about the biggest ever fire in California history when it's now the second biggest already. There's a big problem here, and we've got to get to the bottom of all of it. So that was my ambitious goal, is like solve fire. And I didn't quite realize how much I'd bitten off at that point. But fortunately, I loved getting my teeth stuck into things. And that was like 4 years ago. And so when this terrible day, November 8th, rolled around, we'd already been working on it quite a while and knew how to work with the firefighters and how to navigate, and had just knew what we were looking at. And so I kind of felt like I was standing in a field with a bottle when the lightning storm unexpectedly showed up, or maybe not so unexpectedly as we now know, but I kind of felt like we were kind of pre-stationed, and then this thing happened that allowed us to really see a lot. And that's how it all came to be. Yeah.
As you mentioned, I mean, this film's about community, and the film captures a sense of honesty and comfort that, Lucy, you were able to gain with these families in this community. So I wanted to ask all our guests, can you let us know, one, why you agreed to be in the film, and then talk about maybe the trust building that was done between Lucy, her team, and these communities that made you feel comfortable enough in such intimate and intense moments. Maybe you want to start, Maeve, since Lucy mentioned meeting you first.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I've always kind of had an affinity for storytelling, and I really feel that storytelling is a way to capture history and pass lessons on. And so I felt like it was a great opportunity to allow the cameras to kind of see portions of the fire line where cameras definitely don't usually get to go. A lot of times when you see fires in the media, it's from a highway or a safe space. And so having the ability to bring a film crew into areas of a fire where they usually don't have access kind of seemed like a great way to get our story out there. And I'm not gonna lie, it took some trust at first just to have them in my vehicle. And there's definitely moments, one of the pieces that you saw in the film there during the Woolsey fire with the horses, there's always moments on fires that are really uncomfortable. And so there's definitely a level of trust there to allow the cameras to kind of capture that. But Lucy and her crew were just so amazing and welcoming, and were always really respectful. And so we were able to build up a pretty good trust relationship. They spent a lot of time at the fire station with us. They slept on the floor at the station and ate meals with us and shared the bathrooms with us. And the film crew was constantly being bullied by me with my bad jokes and just general humor. So we developed a great relationship over the course of the time that they followed us around.
How
And
about you, Steve?
shout out to the amazing crew, because it's not just me. And it was just an incredible producers and incredible executive producers and incredible DPs. And it was it was a village, and it was tough work. So I just want to second what Maeve said, that it wasn't just me. It was actually these wonderful team members that were representing, I think, but just to chime that in. But yeah.
Steve,
We got kind of bombarded with media and film crews and everything after the campfire. It's like everyone in the country came to write a story about the campfire. And I think I felt like everyone was writing the same story. Everyone was asking the same questions. And Lucy was the first person who showed up at my shop she was asking great questions. And
you almost chew me out. I mean, you almost chased me out a couple of times. You gave me a hard time, and rightly so, and refused to actually have the same conversation with me, which I really appreciated.
Yeah. Well, we were all pretty raw after the campfire. I think you asked me, what do you think about the campfire, or how did you feel? And I just thought, well, what kind of question is that? Like, didn't know where to start. So yeah, after I yelled at her, we took a break, and then she stayed for 3 or 4 hours, I think. But I appreciated that honesty too. Just like, let's not go to the traditional corners and tell the same story that's been told over and over. I totally agree with Maeve. Firefighting's a real storytelling culture. It's a privilege to be on with Steve Pine, who's the original, documentarian of our culture. But yeah, we have this culture that stays usually within the fire world, and this understanding that we've built as firefighters, that people don't ask us the right questions. We don't get a chance to share that. So I saw this as this great platform to share kind of the honest conversations that we're having in the fire community about the futility of putting fires out and the failures that our predecessors in the fire business have really handed us.
Yeah. Steve, since Zeke passed it to you, do you want to go next about why you?
Well, thanks, Zeke. You're being much too generous. I've been involved with fire since 1967. I've been writing books about fire for 40 years. And I tried to bring context. And it was easy to work with Lucy. They were prepared. They understood the basics, and seemed to be eager for understanding expanding the narrative a bit. And I agree with Zeke. The fire community is great for stories, but mostly, and I say this having been on a crew for 15 seasons, we mostly think with our hands. It's a group, and they're not accustomed to expressing in words or visually. And this is the chance to get those stories out. I like writing books, but a lot more people have watched this premiere than have read my books. So this is a great opportunity for me to work with somebody credible to get some of these ideas out, and I'm grateful for it.
Trina, do you have any comments on? Yeah.
Yes, I do. Being a tribal person and working in my ancestral homelands, my late brother had worked really hard to integrate indigenous knowledge and something we call traditional ecological knowledge into landscape management, planning, and policy. And we'd worked on those things together. And when we talked to our elders and other people, they had said, well, that's what we've been trying to do all of our lives and our parents before us. And so it felt like we're just repeating a pattern that isn't catching. And with the wildfires getting larger and more intense, we've known, from our elders that more people were going to die. And in my younger days, I was more concerned about the environment, the plants, the animals, the ecosystems, and the water. And I still am, but I really, truly believe that firefighters are heroes, much like the people in our country that go to war. They are indeed heroes, even if we don't agree with the policies, and we know that some of the things around that need to be changed. And so I thought, being a tribal person trying to do this work, any way that we can get messaging out that we need to do more burning, more cultural burning, and that we need to be offensive rather than defensive in our approaches, but even going beyond that, that we need to build a relationship with the places and the species that exist in those places to optimize them.
Wonderful. And then last but not least, Don.
Yeah, no, I think having Lucy's folks contact me and with interest in kind of starting to catch a little bit more on the Indigenous fire piece was really important. And as an educator, trying to bring awareness to this and having a land base through the university to be able to act on that and educate people, I thought it's a great opportunity to bring voice to this and hopefully change the conversation, as others have mentioned here. And I think one of the challenges in this film, in working with filmmakers on these kind of things is, a lot of people want to get, a picture of those cultural burns taking place. And then I remember Lucy's team contacting me several times about opportunities for burning. And, it's not the kind of thing where you can just pinpoint a date and say, we're going to go to this place and we're going to burn. It's got to be the right place in the landscape for it. And, I think the examples, and I'm burning deer grass in a couple of scenes in the photo, but it's springtime and it's really hard to get fire to carry in some of these places. And it's not necessarily the right time in some of these places. But, the opportunity obviously existed for Trina's country where she was able to do some burning. And I think that's a really important message. And I was happy to be able to see that being included in the film too. So great message, and I'm really excited to have been part of it.
Wonderful. The chat is buzzing, but I'm gonna keep asking a few more questions. For Lucy and Julian in particular, this subject is so expansive and there's just so much to explore. How did you start forming what the core of the subject would be? And then how did you determine the limits or boundaries of how big you wanted to reach the story? Or how,
Well, it was really simple and it's really complicated. And I'll take a crack at answering it, but only when I flagged that you need so much support. And I'm so grateful to our amazing producers, and starting with Julian, who you see, because it was a clear goal. I was like just determined to get to the bottom of this fire thing. And I was so moved. And the more you got in and the more you saw what residents of firefighters were going through, you just couldn't sort of brush it off and kind of put a line under it and say, I'm going to stop there, right? You had to just keep going until you got there. And I had this assumption about climate change, as I mentioned in the film. So to start with, it was going to be a short film about the Thomas Fire, and then we were going to get to climate change, and it was going to be kind of my climate change film. And then that turned out to be not what actually all was going on. It turned out to be a more complicated story. And I just wasn't gonna compromise. I want to be accountable to the truth. That's why we watch these documentaries and feel like we understand the situation, because people like me don't stop when it's convenient to stop. And we just keep going and say, if it's more complicated, we're going to have to make a more complicated film. And I think that what you see is it's a longer and more complicated film. And actually, I've cut out a lot of amazing material that, and a lot of amazing people. And I filmed with so many incredible people. I just want to put a big shout out to the incredible people that we filmed with, and to say that it breaks my heart that you can't see more of them. And the people that I filmed, I mean, those fires, I mean, I spoke, you see a few people in the movie that had incredibly moving stories and incredible heroes, but there were so many. And the firefighters, I mean, I spoke to so many incredible firefighters who did so much work at their own risk that saved real lives, and the stories were incredible, but I just couldn't fit it all in. And I've never quite had that in a project before. But then there was more, and then the logging story turned out to be fascinating, and nobody had reported it, so I had to put that in there. And then I kept going to these town meetings and thinking, this is wild, and this is part of the story too. And so I felt like it was really important to represent that. And then, of course, talking to Steve, and then also just thinking, as you do when you're filming day and night in disaster zones for months, and you're having all these thoughts, you thought there's a lot of there's a lot to think about here, about a bigger picture, and I just wanted to include it all. And I'm just so grateful that I had these incredible producers and financiers that were generous enough to support that kind of effort, so that we could really just get to the bottom of what we thought was important to share. it's a long answer to that question, but it's not simple fire, right? Or we'd have solved it. And so I hope the audience can handle it being a journey, because it took me on a journey. And that's why I put myself in the film. I don't ever put myself in the film. I just couldn't find another way to take you around the edges of the complicated story without having my voice peeking in around the edges to bring you into what was sort of how we got there. Julian, do you have something to add to that? I always want to try and throw the spotlight on incredible producers.
I think it's a blessing and a curse to be working on a subject where, as you are filming and editing, it is continuing to evolve in a major way. As Lucy said, like, we started making a short documentary about the Thomas Fire and what happened in Montecito, and while we're doing it, November 8 happens, and Paradise and the Woolsey Fire. And then as we go through editing, every 3 or 4 months, something else major would happen. And every year the fires got bigger, it got worse. And you felt like it was really important not to stop and finish. You needed to somehow capture that. And I think we had a period where we were sort of waiting to finish the film, and this year there were bigger fires across Western United States, and also at the beginning of the year in Australia in 2020. And I think those actually gave us more perspective as to, like, okay, how can we shape the story to really make this comprehensive? And I think meeting Dawn and Trina and that whole different communities and how they're using fire as a tool was something that we had wanted to do from the very beginning of filming. But as Dawn pointed out, it took a very long time to find the filming opportunities. And it was until we had those filming opportunities and to hear from them that very important part of the story crystallized. And Lucy and the editors found ways to incorporate that in a structural way to kind of tell that story. So yeah, it's fun and tough at the same time.
To realize actually me coming from Europe was not, and not understanding fire was not a trivial part of the story, and that did seem to be what happened. And for me, that journey of uncovering the landscape and history and geography, and to understand the layers of what had happened on this place that I'd moved to, and to learn about the genocide, which I'd never heard of, that followed the gold rush, and to peel back the history and understand. And I thought that was so powerful, and I was so grateful to have that opportunity to learn about this place and understand the native burning story. Yeah, that's right.
I've got a little something to follow up on that just real quick, Lucy. That I thought of when you mentioned the genocide of the people and that being part of the story. Is just that when I see Pete Moak, the old logger in the movie, I just saw on Facebook he was discussing with someone else the fact that his great great uncle Sam Moak was responsible for genocide. The Moaks, it's well known in Butte County that the Moak family, they were part of some of the worst massacres.
Wow, he's the guy, by the way, with the mustache. That there's 2 guys that take me up the hill to show me what the land the campfire came through. Mm-hmm. And he's the first older and mustached of those 2 guys. And he also, we have a double interview with him, and he's sitting on the left with the 2 guys sitting down and who know a lot about the forest composition and who are in Concow. And he's that guy.
But what that brings up for me is just that managing land can be this really important part of our reconciliation. And that, when you see Pete Moak, this old logger, really espousing stuff that a lot of people would say, oh, he's an environmentalist, doesn't like logging. He spent his whole life logging in Concow. But to go to meetings and to go to field trips with Native people and this descendant of people who actually did the genocide, and to see us all working together around healing the land, I think that's, to me, the really important thing of what you're doing, and that we're getting us all together around the land, around the fire.
Yeah. I want to make sure that we answer at least a few questions from the chat. And this one is kind of combined with something I had in mind. I mean, when we watched the film, it was also an extremely emotional watch for us, as we were in the middle of fire season here in Los Angeles. So we were watching your film and looking outside our window, and it was gray and red, or all kinds of colors outside. So obviously it's an extremely emotional journey for everyone on our digital stage. And so a lot of people have questions about some of these moments and how you navigated these moments, both on when you're shooting and after, when some of the subjects have seen the film.
What's the question?
Oh, navigating the emotions and mental health of the subjects as you're shooting.
Well, I'm very transparent. I think that you see me in the film, and I just want to again shout out to the firefighters. For me, you know, I'm an emotional filmmaker. I think different people come to to make documentaries from different angles, and I'm definitely an emotional, character-driven filmmaker. I like emotional movies that take me on journeys inside worlds, where I can really follow some stories by people. And this is a sort of mass storytelling. I really deliberately wanted to include residents and firefighters and insight. But I really want to throw this question to Maeve, because I think that I don't know if people understand the emotional toll of firefighters. Firefighters are the people you call when it gets too difficult for any human being. So you just call the fire department and they're going to come and sort out everything that's difficult. And I really felt that, and I felt like I didn't want to overlook what the toll it's taking on them. And that for me is extremely emotional. And I feel like we should all, I just wanted people to be aware of that emotion. I think maybe if you live, even with the Woolsey fire that's right here, you know, just miles from where I'm standing. And if you didn't live right in the fire zone, if you lived a block away, you could maybe pretend it wasn't happening. But what was happening in there is so emotional. People losing their houses, people losing their pets, people losing their belongings, people losing, you know, facing death and being traumatized in these very life and death situations. And that's the residents. And the firefighters are doing that every single day for work. And some of them, Sean, who's in the movie, I spoke to, who's an incredible firefighter who saved so many people that day. He told me that this last summer, I think it was the Bear Fire that came to Paradise and killed 16 people this last summer. Another terrible fire that came right up to Paradise. He spent 68 days without going home. And this is what the firefighters are going through with these big fires. And I think we need to understand, and Maeve, I just want to shut up and throw that one to Maeve, because I think that we need to understand, you know, it's emotional stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that there's a section in the film where I say that the majority of the time people are calling us on their worst days. You know, it's very rare that someone calls us for a joyful event other than possibly a birthday party that they ask us to bring the engine to swing by and wave to the kids and let them spray water. And those are definitely the joyful moments, but there's a lot of tough moments. And on those incidents, you know, it's imperative for us to be able to really look past that. And like I mentioned in the film, of compartmentalizing that and realizing, like, yes, Mr. and Mrs. Jones just lost their home. They also lost all these horses. They lost their family. What do we do to get them quickly back on the road to a place that's safe, and then move on to the next house, and kind of process of elimination of where we can do the best work in the short amount of time. And personally for me, it's challenging. You know, I have 2 little children at home, and every time I get a phone call that says I have to leave for 2 weeks and go to a fire somewhere else, they don't understand that I have to go and help other people. And they say, why can't you stay home and help us and protect us? And during the Thomas fire, I was out on the fire for 29 days and my home was evacuated. My kids were in a hotel with my mom. You know, my kids didn't understand the entire time, just saying, why aren't you here? Why are you there helping them? And so it's always this fine balance as first responders that we're kind of trying to do the best that we can, but also do good at home as well. And that home piece definitely takes the brunt of our emotional toll and our time on the road.
Sorry, I'm getting notice from our tech team that we have actually run out of time. I did want to read a couple comments just so the team can read, but people are saying it's such a powerful moving documentary. They want to say bravo to Lucy, Julian, and the entire team. Congrats on taking such an important, complex story and illuminating so many things all at once. Amazing film. I'm really glad I got to see it. So I hope you guys get a chance to see the chat later, but I really want to say thank you for joining us to speak to us about this film. I really appreciate you taking up the time. I want to say thank you to our technical team and my colleague Harry Vaughn for manning the chat, and thank you all for joining us here
Thank
tonight.
you. I was going to say, you can always continue the conversation on social media. We always love that. We're Bring Your Own Brigade on Facebook. I think we just made the Facebook page because we're brand new, or Lucy Walker Film, or just, I think you'll find all of us are always really happy to hear from anyone if there are questions to engage with later.
Perfect. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.